Hey everyone, Conrad here, and I'm really grateful to be back on another episode of the Well Aware podcast. Today with me is Dillon Del Rosso, co-founder of PeakBot. I'm really excited. In fact, Dillon and I have been trying to put this time together for months now. I want to submit an apology in that I should have been doing this. We should have had this episode way sooner. But I felt like I had wanted to put together just such a tremendous show of performance because Dillon and I not only go way back, but we also have such an intricate relationship at this point. I have been a client of PeakBot since its early days. Well Aware has been serving PeakBot. And so Dillon and I have had discussions from, founder to founder, business owner to business owner about operations and making, certain responsibilities meet. We could go on and on about so many different things. And I really love this topic of, what does it mean to be a founder who is to some degree interested in the stock market, to any degree is interested in making money, because that is why we exist as business owners. And part of that challenge is the fear of deciding where to invest your capital, both while you're working, both while you're building a business, and just how to make these decisions around what different types of opportunities do you have. Like investing in the stock market isn't the only way to go about investing your capital, but it is one that by the means of Robinhood has become way more accessible. And yet we could talk about the distinctions between that and using PeakBot as your system of investing in stocks. So there's just so much we could get into. And that's the reason for my wanting to delay this conversation. So I just wanted to sit down with Dylan and be like, let's prepare it all. And then I was like, wait a minute, Dylan and I are really great at just, shooting the shit, frankly. And So Dylan, thank you for being here. How are you today? Please introduce yourself.
Well, Conrad, first of all, great intro. Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I know you're doing well. Thank you for having me on the show here. Very excited to be here and getting into all of those things that you just discussed. In fact, I hope that you remember most of what you just said, because I want to make sure we talk about all of those things. To introduce myself briefly, Dillon Del Rosso, co-founder of PeakBot. We are an automated trading platform for the everyday retail trader. We wanted to take how Wall Street and hedge funds have been trading for decades with algorithms and computers, and we wanted to provide that and make it easy to use for the everyday person. So I'm sure we'll get more into that. But a very quick background on me, Conrad, if that's helpful, is I come from I'm a sales and marketing guy. If you can't already tell, that's my background, both B2B and B2C sales. I went to a small school in Pennsylvania that nobody's ever heard of called Misericordia University in the middle of nowhere. I graduated with a sport management degree, used it. I got into the world of sports sales, University of Maryland, for a couple of years. And then I worked for the New York Jets. For any Jets fans out there, which that sucks if you are. I was their manager of premium partnerships. So I was selling their luxury suites to their sponsors and partners, which was a great gig at 24. I had my Jets lapel little pin on. I was in the city in these skyscrapers. I thought my shit didn't stink, because it didn't for a second. And then COVID hit. No more suites to sell. So that job kind of lost its lust, if you will. Got out of sports. Moved into a marketing agency here in New Jersey as their VP of sales. Did that for a little while. The millennial in me jumps around from job to job, at least in corporate America, trying to find what I really loved. Did that for a while. And my last corporate gig before going full-time entrepreneur and full-time PeakBot last October was with ADP, large HR and payroll company. Did sales for them in the tri-state here. So outside of that, Conrad, as he mentioned, we go way back. I'm a passionate networker and connector of people in business. And that's, if you know anything about Conrad, you know that that's his bread and butter. And that's how we connected in a networking group. We hit it off. We love making connections, so much so that you have you do that on the daily, but you also built a business around that specifically. Yeah, that's enough about me. I'm sure we'll have a lot of time to talk about the details, but
Dylan, I really appreciate that background, because I think for anyone who wants to get to know you, I think it's fascinating to recognize that like you're at least from an age perspective. I mean, granted, you left a couple things out, I will say.
Okay.
You are now a young father.
Yes.
You
Thank you.
are as much as you express yourself now as a co-founder of PeakBot, I would say that when we first met, the conversation of stock trading was not on the forefront of our discussions.
No.
Although once you started to bring that up to me, it represented for me again a huge fear that I had, which was like here I am investing as much time as I possibly can right out of the gate in my 20s, trying to build my own sense of business. And yet here I am also sitting on capital that was, thankfully possessed by my family and given to me to make decisions both on their behalf, on behalf of my future. And here I am thinking, like, am I making the world's greatest, most difficult decisions about where to invest these two qualitative assets that I have, time and money, and trying to figure out what makes the most sense around that. Tell me, please, just for the audience, how did we navigate from this world of networking and marketing and sales and that whole relationship building dynamic to this world of bots and
Yeah.
stock trading via automation?
Well, you kind of set me up there pretty nicely. You mentioned time and money, right? Saving time and money. Well, the reason primarily we started PeakBot, and I can get into like more of the details, but the reason we started PeakBot was because the retail trader, okay, and when I say retail trader, I mean your everyday person. Conrad and I, we're retail traders, right? We're not institutional traders. We're not part of a hedge fund. We're not managing a portfolio at Morgan Stanley, whatever. My point is, we're everyday people trying to invest in the stock market and make a move, make a difference, generate some income. Retail traders fail for the most part because they don't have the time. They don't have a winning strategy, and they don't have the discipline. Emotions get in the way. Fear and greed ruin people in the stock market, right? As we've seen time and time again. So what we wanted to do was find a way to save time and money while eliminating fear and greed. And to be honest, when you say how did we get from networking and trying to figure out how to save time and money to these bots, well, it was a natural progression. We had already probably gotten started on PeakBot as we were in the height of those conversations we were having with ourselves. And it just naturally lent itself to each other because what we needed to return to everyday people was a peace of mind is everything, right? And a level of trust. So what we went about doing was we wanted to take well-known trading strategies that have been around for decades, okay? Myself and my co-founder, Ben, we grew up on the same street on a small town in New Jersey. Like we're not industry guys. We were retail traders. We were struggling trying to do that and work a full-time job as most do. And we figured there's got to be a solution for this. At the time, that was 2020. And we were like, how is there no household name for automated trading? Why doesn't this exist already, right? And what we found was there were systems out there, but they weren't easy to use. They were very complex. They were not affordable by any means to the average person. And they weren't very transparent. A lot of shady business and results and a lot of weird stuff going on. So we wanted to flip all that on its head and come up with a platform that was easy to use, was affordable and accessible to the everyday person, and was fully transparent. And so that's what we did. We trade options. Specifically, we sell options contracts. If you're not familiar with what selling options is, well, then maybe we'll get into that, or go to our website and schedule time on my calendar. I'll walk you through it personally if you want to know more about selling options. Because what's important here, and Conrad said this, stock trading, when we first met each other 4 years ago, which is crazy that we've known each other that long and still haven't met in person. COVID kind of like made that happen. We need to do that. But, I was not much of a stock trader. I've been a repeat loser in the stock market ever since like 2017, 2018. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't have the interest in learning and taking the time for that and all that stuff. I didn't have much money to use. I had like, $2,500, $5,000 to just mess around with. And that's what I was doing. I was messing around and I was getting burnt. And so my friend Ben, co-founder, brains behind PeakBot, when he got his big boy job, he couldn't trade successfully anymore. He worked at PwC as an auditor, and he was busy. And so he coded these algorithms. He showed them to me. They worked. While I'm on the 12th green on my round of golf, I'm placing trades in my pocket. I'm just like, what are we doing here, Ben? If they can make this accessible to everybody and affordable. Everybody's going to want this. So that was how PeakBot was born. That was 4 years ago, August of 2020. We founded the business. We did 2 years of beta testing. August of 22, we launched, and we've been, providing subscriptions ever since and automating people's portfolio and letting them focus on what really matters in life, their career, their family, their social life, and just letting us operate in the background. Again, rambling already, but you knew that was going to happen with me.
Dillon, the context is so crystal for me because, again, I look back on when our relationship started and where I was at with business, right? Well Aware is now over 4 years old. We're going to be 5 next year.
And congrats.
Thank you. I'm amazed we've made it out this long. I'm surprised I didn't, torch and burn everything. So in that sort of anxiety state, I was among I assume many entrepreneurs, many young folks in their 20s and 30s, working out not within the corporate sphere of a 9 to 5, but rather through their own means of trying to build a business. And of course, we're trying to hedge our bets. Literally, we ourselves are recognizing the risk that we take in investing in ourselves. At least I think some of us are. And we're trying to recognize these other forms of capital that we need to invest in. Granted, family pressures, societal pressures, friendships telling us like, hey, what are they doing? And us feeling that pressure of like what other decisions are out there amongst our choices with time and what we're supposed to do to make the most of it. Stock trading just becomes a part of that conversation thread. And I think for some folks, to your point, retail trading, this idea of being a day trader, let alone just a general stock investor, is something that people fall into at some point.
Yeah.
Either deeply or on the shallow, on the surface. And yet, regardless, because of where you start out as a general lay person, you may find yourself completely out of your depth in terms of, what even stock terminology reflects on. You're going to be out of your depth on, just the general woes of experience that you're going to go through in terms of like, yeah, you're going to have a good day, maybe you have a bad day, investing in the actual stock itself versus the options. And knowing the difference between those two, the risk that you're leveraging, like all of this information like just starts coming up and you're just like, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm doing. And yet you're supposed to somehow figure this out because this is your future. This is society's future that we're sort of counting on if we want to look at the stock market in that respect still. So that is what I love so much about PeakBot. When you first started, showcasing all this to me, I was like, Jesus Christ, like maybe I'm actually going to find some resolution around this one part of my life that honestly gives me a lot of stress, which is like, I think I'm spending my time wisely, but is my money being given that same kudos? Yep. And of course, it's not to say that PeakBot is the one and only stock trading platform and tool and device and means of investing in the market that I need to invest in. It's just one of them, but it's one that gives, I think, this really interesting exploration of passively experiencing the market while actively studying what's going on, passively recognizing a bot's performance on your behalf, actively understanding what that entails in terms of the broader mechanisms of what's going on, and giving you that time to think without having to feel like you have to make a decision every single day or every single week. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's what everyone's looking for, right? That's what technology is supposed to promise, outside of the fact that we end up working harder.
Yeah, no, and first of all, you nailed it. I mean, like PeakBot, it's meant to be another tool in the tool belt, right? Like this is not we're not telling anybody to just ditch their current investment strategy or trading strategy and just go all in on PeakBot. No, that's not what we're getting at here. We want PeakBot, and this is truly what it's become over the last, 3 or 4 years, is it's the perfect supplement to any existing investment strategy. Whatever you're doing, if you're still doing it consistently, there's probably good reason for it. And don't switch that up, but let PeakBot operate for you in the background, right? Like that's what we're doing. We're generating consistent income while minimizing risk. We're not going and rolling the dice on these crazy trades. Now there's losers. Like there's another thing that's really important for people to understand when it comes to personal finance and investing your money and specifically trying to play the stock market, right? Like there will be losses. There's no silver bullet here that's just going to prevent you from ever losing your money ever again. That's just not the case. We have a very volatile stock market, specifically, right now. I mean, the market is chaos. A lot of people are terrified that we're heading into this pullback and the stock market's just going to keep falling. Then the other half think it's this is when to buy. We're going to be pulling back up. So wherever you fall on the stock market, it's so important to recognize that, specifically with our types of strategies, it's less trading and more investing. It's the vehicle of our investment happens to be short-term trades, but this is a long-term investment. And you talk about other ways to generate revenue and what are other great ways to generate income. We compare what we do to real estate. If you were an entrepreneur and you had rental properties, right? Yeah, whatever it might be. My partner is in real estate. He's got a couple condos or apartments here or there, and he's renting them out on Airbnb. It's the same thing here. It's like, Conrad, if me and you were to go buy a house out somewhere, beautiful outside the mountain range, somewhere on the beach, whatever, and we bought the house for $500,000. Me and you, we're going to take that cash and we're going to get this house and we're going to start getting it rented because we care more about the rent that we're collecting than we do about the value of the property. We can't control what the house is worth. We can't control that. That's not in our hands, so we can't worry about it. We care. We care a little bit. Of course, we'd love to buy it now and sell it for 10 or 20 in 20 years. Well, 10 or 20 years for more than we bought it for. That's cherry on top. But what are me and you really concerned about? We want to collect rent. If we can collect rent for 10 or 20 years, we might end up selling that house for $400,000. And on paper, me and you lost $100,000 on that transaction. But Conrad, we know damn well we didn't lose $100,000 on that investment. Why? Because we were collecting rent for 10 or 20 years. That far outweighs any losses we're going to incur along the way. So these last 2 or 3 weeks in the market, we have traders who come to us. And typically it's the ones who are less experienced to the market and less, are a little less aware. They go, oh my God, I'm down $1,500 in my 20K account. What the heck did you guys do to me? I'll be like, well, first let's look at your trades. Okay, gotcha. This is what happened here. Okay. But we're playing the long game. Like in real estate, in a rental property, some drunk asshole's going to come punch a hole in your wall. Your AC unit's going to break. Your dishwasher's going to go down. You're going to have to spend money to keep this apartment or condo or house up to snuff. And so that's for more investing. So it's the same way. Like you're going to have losing trades. But if you lost 1,500 this week, but you're making 300 or 400, 500 a week in that premium that we're collecting. Now we're getting a little more terminology in options trading. Premium is what is equivalent to rent. If you're collecting that every week, it's only going to take a couple good weeks to get out of this hole. You're okay. Let's not think about buying a Ferrari next year. Let's try to get you retired a little early. Let's knock a few years off of that retirement. And that's really the whole approach here. So we had a live show yesterday with a special guest. His name is Matt Cashman. He's from the OCC. He's an options trading nerd. And we asked, hey, after 40 years of trading options or trading in the stock market, what's one thing you would have told your younger self who was just getting involved? He said, and this was philosophical, but he was like, hey, keep convincing yourself and keep telling yourself, because it's true, nothing's as bad as you think it is, and nothing's as good as you think it is. Like, stay tempered, stay level. When things are bad, they're not that bad. When things are great, they're actually not that great from a results standpoint in the market. Stay level, stay tempered, and just stick to your strategy. So that's what we try to do.
I want to share, Dillon, that I've always found myself mired in your sales tack amidst all of our PeakBot level conversations. And yet at the same time, I always walk away with a different sense of understanding around how I can view the stock market, despite not being a day-to-day student of said market and the various things that are going on. And again, I find peace of mind with that because I can look at the results of your system and I can look at how it produces for me and the way that I've chosen to take risk with PeakBot. And I like that, to your point, and we've had these conversations, I want to say several times, about whenever I feel down about a situation that's occurred or an option that traded and it made me feel uncomfortable, how I had to trade on a loss and things like that, how you're able to sort of give me some heads up as to like what exactly that means. I know it's not necessarily a scalable relationship between you and every PeakBot user out there to kind of end up being this, this momentary therapist, although that seems to be 80% of the job in any service-based business, as far as I'm aware. I like that this experience on the whole gives you a feeling that that things are overall moving ahead. And I think that's something that every wise investment strategist will tell you in the world of stock market trading, is that you're playing a long game. As long as you continue to keep up with it, things will play out well in the long run. Now, I do want to highlight that in regards to being transparent, I think it's really fascinating seeing how you're one of the few stock trading systems that I've seen that is fully upfront about how everybody is doing. Now, granted, there's a layer of privacy in which you don't know exactly who the
Yeah.
users are, right? But I can put myself out in a list if I chose to. I could reveal who I was in terms of my results on a week-to-week basis. And I think that's really cool that you're able to showcase that in a way that even you yourselves, you and Ben, and other folks working on the PeakBot team that are involved in making these trades, you guys are revealing your data on the week-to-week basis. You're showing what decisions you're making. You're showing what decisions are winning, which ones are losing. You retrospect and look back, which is all just a great workflow, right? To reflect on everybody else's things. That, like, at the end of the day, the system isn't truly passive. No passive income system truly exists. It's another great fundamental lesson about PeakBot, much as any other type of business. Even in my world of virtual assistants, like, it's not just like the team is out there working and I'm just sitting here passively collecting an income stream. It's like, no, I'm actively maintaining this agency, and that takes a lot of time and energy. So it's not truly passive in that regard, and it never will be. To that same extent, you're able to point out that you get to take time to be more thoughtful about what's going on, because you are not operating day to day as a trader making these decisions. It would make sense if you were actively day trading that you also spend time to strategically think and retrospect, but you don't have to do that. The system is running the workflow for you. You get to think about how that information is ultimately executing. And I think that's a different layer, right? That's the executive layer, which is really cool to have at a retail level.
Yeah, because you mentioned the transparency here. For us, we still to this day scratch our head as to why we're the only platform, or if not one of the only platforms, who share a full list of our traders' results. What do we have to hide? Well, first of all, it's data for us, right? We're not picking stocks for people at the end of the day. We're not financial advisors yet. That's on the roadmap in the future, or blah, blah, blah. But point is, you still gotta, we're giving you the ingredients. You still gotta go and cook, right? You still have to add it. Like, yes, this is automated. We're doing 95% of the work.
This is the HelloFresh of stock trading.
Yeah, you still have to go and place that stock and set your budget and that kind of stuff. But, for us, I want to know exactly how our strategies are performing on everybody's trades, because now that's data for me. I can go on our website right now and see that, Amazon has only won 65% of the time versus another stock that wins 85% of the time. I want to know that, right? Because now I can go and say, oh boy, well, our strategies, and just to kind of veer off a little bit, when you trade options, the beautiful part about options trading, and for those who aren't familiar, we're essentially giving ourselves the right to buy and sell stocks at a certain price on a certain date. Summed up, 20,000 foot view, that's what options trading is. You're betting that a stock is going to go to a certain price or not go to a certain price by a certain time. And if you're right, you get paid. If you don't, you pay up. But the point is, what we wanted to do was automate these strategies, because it's all math-based. Conrad, engineers, people with math-based, science, they love PeakBot. They love trading options, because the way we set up our strategies, they're going to win 70% of the time, period. There's no question in that. That's not me saying something and hoping it becomes true. The law of large numbers, the way we've selected our parameters to make these trades without getting too nerdy, is giving ourselves a 70% chance to win every single trade we enter into. And when you think about that, and somebody comes in and they have a bad first week or first month, and they're like, well, what do you mean I'm supposed to win 70% of the time? I'm winning 50. Well, if we were to flip a quarter right now 5 times, I might get tails 4 out of 5 times. That's not insane to say on 5 flips that I might get tails 4 times. Not likely, but it's not crazy. But if I flip this quarter 1,000 times, we both know, and anybody listening to this knows, we're going to be damn close to 50-50 on heads and tails, right? So it's the same thing with trading options. We're playing the law of large numbers here. You make 1,000 trades that are supposed to win 70% of the time on paper, you're going to be damn near close to that 70% win rate, if not right on it. But your first 5 trades, you might have 3 or 4 losers. or you might have 4 or 5 winners, but you got to stay tempered. You got to stick to it. So we automate these probability-based strategies that over time, you're going to perform well. Our traders made 32% on average from July 23 to July 24. The market returned like 23% in that time. We're thrilled with that. There's nothing else that we want. Like, we don't need to go and double your money in a year. That's really hard to do. Really hard to do. You got to stare at a stock chart all day, know exactly what you're doing, and get lucky. Consistently. Do nothing else. Then you can go double your money in a year. It's not realistic for most people.
But to your point, then again, we're going back to the sort of the time versus money equation. You just said, if you really do want to double your income, then you are going to have to put in an obscene amount of work and still be lucky enough.
Yeah.
Whereas just being ahead of the market and not having to invest anywhere near the time is a miracle in and of itself, right? I don't care if my success rate is 10% versus 20% better. If in terms of the time commitment I've made, the difference is between 100% of effort versus just 20% of effort, right? It may seem like I'm losing half, but the reality is I've gained a whole other perspective on value, which is, again, we're going back to this qualitative asset of time, which is a lot harder to recognize. Dillon, I want to sort of shift on that topic because there is something I do want to bring up, which is one, just this loving parallel that I think you brought into my mind, which was this idea around how you like to see from a data aggregate standpoint how everybody in the PeakBot network is doing. And I know we've talked a lot about networking in that similar respect, and it's kind of an end goal for me with my introduction management software, where I want to see the totality of introductions that are being made in order to recognize, which ones are working and how can I play almost a probability of success of people closing business with each other just because of, past successes with those same warm introductions. In a similar vein, I do a parallel justice of watching so many different operations at play because we have a VA team on our backs that are essentially looking at each of the different operations that are being performed for a given client, for given clients, whether it's the same ops, different ops. And it's just fascinating, to your point, to see how everybody's performing ultimately on that and be able to have an analysis type perspective on each of those different types of performances. I want to talk to you about, in that regard, how WellAware has worked with PeakBot, because you guys were amongst a very interesting crew of clients. You are among the startups of our network who, we discounted you because you guys are doing something crazy, right? You were building a business in a very scalable fashion, and that requires a little bit more love and attention than trying to home grow a service-based business, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being a coach, being a consultant, being a solopreneur in that business ownership mindset. Like, we love that, but startups are a little bit more dangerous, right? There's a lot more expected of you, and it's a little bit harder to kind of get past into that hockey stick level of growth. Like, you guys are, if I'm clear, you guys are actively investing right now, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep.
In all of that regard, when you came up to me and said, like, hey, here's where our team's at, here's what we're doing, like, here's all these tasks that we need help with. Talk to me a little bit about that, because again, you guys are trading time for money. And then at the same time, I'm like, okay, well, now we're trading money for time. So walk me through that experience.
Yeah. First of all, great question. For us, we were well aware that we needed help. Had to, right? I mean, that was part of probably why he came up with the name.
A friend of mine would grab a mug somewhere and start drinking from it. That's
So we were well aware that we needed help, just like any startup, right? There's never enough time in the day, and there's never enough hands available to be working on your business. And if you do feel that way, like you have the time and you have the help, you're wrong. I mean, you're wrong, or something you're doing ain't right, or it already exists, or it shouldn't be easy. And for us, you're absolutely right. Time is money. And for a small team, when we reached out for help, probably almost 2 years ago now, it was our co-founders, an intern, and some developers. And we also had full-time jobs. on top of, we most entrepreneurs, it goes unspoken that it's like they have to feed their families, they have to pay their bills. I'm only full-time PeakBot for the last 8 months, 10 months. My partner's the last 4 months, but this business has been running for 4 years. So trying to balance the full-time job and PeakBot, near impossible. And so we decided we're an automation business here. We have a lot of manual tasks, operational, administrative tasks that we were doing as co-founders. We were working, I don't know if it's on the business, not in the business, or we were working in the business, not on the business, right? I was making content. I was sending email blasts. We were pulling data, all this stuff that like you would otherwise hire somebody, if not an entire team of people to do for you. But when you're a startup, you don't have the money to do that. Bootstrap, you're paying for it and you're doing it. So for us, when we got to a certain level of, okay, we know that we can generate X amount of revenue if the co-founders of people working on the business can get X done. And in order for us to get X done, we need to get rid of A, B, and C. We got to get this off of our plate. And when we started generating some revenue, we said, okay, well, at scale here, we can afford this. Not to mention, you and your team, as you gave us a great deal, and your VA services, even without a great deal, are incredibly, affordable and fair. To plug you there for a second. And for us, it was just, hey, let's give up on a little bit of control. Because when you're a startup co-founder or founder and entrepreneur, it's your baby, right? It's like, I have a newborn here in the next room. She's crying a storm right now. And in the next few months or a year or something, there's going to be a time where we got to give this baby to somebody else to let her be watched by somebody that's not mom and dad. And that's going to be terrifying for us to do. But we got to work on us, right? Like, I still have a relationship with my wife that we need to make sure is, flourishing, along with the love for this baby. And it's the same thing with your business. It's like, you got to let this business live and breathe, and you got to give away some responsibility. And if you can hire a team, if you can find a babysitter that you can trust to get the work done, and you can give clear instructions on how to change this diaper, how to pull this data, I'm giving the parallels, then you can really start to get a lot more done, a lot more efficiently. Yes, there's a cost to do so, but like, how much money and time were you leaving on the table by trying to get this done yourself? Not to mention the lack of quality that might come in if you're scatterbrained and your plate is too full. Then you just start checking boxes and cutting corners. And it was a no-brainer for us to finally say, we need the help. So we raised a little bit of money, we generated some revenue for the business, and we said, outsource. Last thing I'll say is, like, we're an automation company. Why the hell are we not automating our processes? We gave them to your VAs, and not only were they able to get this done, some of the manual work done, but the collective effort between your team and our team, we were able to say, wait a minute. Okay, you guys have been doing this for 4 weeks now. We've realized that there's a repeatable process here. Let's trim down on the manual work. Let's instead just tweak this and automate this and put some, code into this Excel sheet so this pulls menu. And we automated processes. Ultimately, it took a village for us to realize there's way more room to automate this stuff. Yes, let's continue to give the manual tasks to our VAs, but it took giving it away for us to realize
that was it. Yes.
Yeah, from
and
an
that's
outside
what I
point of
love.
view.
That you guys graduated in the most stellar way possible. That's what I like to tell everyone. Like, you guys finally found the time to sit back and look at all these workflows that you found yourselves bogged down in. Yeah. You walked away from them just enough to be able to breathe, look at the things that mattered, and then you went back to those same operations and went, wait a minute, I know a way to do this smarter. I know it is more efficiently. And because you had the time to think through that, you then implemented it. And then my team came back to me and we went to go work on other people and we didn't mind. We loved that.
Yeah, the funnel is very funny because it's just like, hey, all right, here's all these tasks. Let's give them out to the VAs. And then after a couple of weeks or a month, we would then take this whole list of workflows and say, let's pull this out because now we can automate this stuff. And there's always more work that needs to be done and going through this funnel. So I just reached out to you a couple weeks ago, not even last week. And I said, I have a whole new work process that we need help for. I haven't, and this, you get back to the whole conundrum. I haven't had time to give you the process. I haven't had the time to write out all the steps for your VAs. But God forbid, I just put aside an hour, I get it done, and the work starts. So it's like, look, it's a very, very fine line, and it's a dance. There's always a give and a take. It takes two to tango. It takes a lot to tango when you're trying to build a business. And we really appreciate you and your team always stepping up and being there.
Dillon, we're grateful. And it means a lot to me that I get to see both sides of your business, both a little bit of the back end and, where your team needs help, both as a startup, both as just a business in and of itself. I think, again, those two things can be recognized separately. What are the things that run the business? What are the things that build it? How do those operations differ? And what are the right hands that you need available to right then and there? When it's your own set of hands, you need to be more available. Okay, you now go find a way to replace where your hands are currently so that you can go bring back your own time. Where you just need the right personnel to step in and take on a certain operation, great. Like, go find the person that's actually really good at those things. And all to do so within, again, this sort of the light and darkness of like, where am I at with my cash flow this month, and how are we going to make those ends meet? Like, how does that all become very flexible? I love that. I love that about startups. I think it's the biggest challenge in the world, right? To be able to just build a business out of nowhere, or seemingly out of nowhere, and to recognize all the difficulties that it takes to then get to a point where now everything's looking smooth and feels almost like an enterprise in terms of the way it's all just so neatly organized and SOP figured out. And I'm so shocked when I talk to people who are like, oh, I just want to automate this right out the gate. I just want to, I think delegation is smart, but I really just need this to be systematized because that's going to be the most cost efficient. I'm like, you're suffering right now. Your automation is going to solve your problem weeks, months, quarters away. Why are you dealing with this problem right now if your cash flow is suffering and you can solve the problem manually tomorrow? And I still, it's such a fascinating conversation to have, both like logically in terms of like, let's play out the math, both time and money wise, and sort of put those two cash flows next to each other and sort of look at that versus, just the actual, to your point, the emotional side of it. And that is why I freaking love PeakBot, because PeakBot is that exact same conversation being held in a very unique marketplace, which is the stock market itself.
Yeah. And, you make me think about something when you talk about a business owner deciding whether they should, manually outsource some work or find a way to automate it. When you, like, of course, we'd love to all automate everything, use AI for everything. Yeah, sure. It's not as easy said as done, whatever that saying is. But my point is, when you give out the work to a VA or any client or whatever, when you're paying for help, regardless of the cost, when you're paying for help, when I'm going and I'm paying well aware to get work done for me, and any smart entrepreneur should be counting every penny that goes out of your pocket into somebody else's, even if they're helping. And you're going to find the efficient process. I'm not going to have a VA work a workflow that is broken for more than a week or two. Because if they're spending 3 hours on a task that they could be spending 30 minutes on that and paying you, it's paying you less. If I could pay you less for more work, I'm going to do that 10 out of 10 times. So when you give away this workflow and you see it start to come through and you do your checks on it, believe me, you're going to know right away, inherently, subconsciously, this was broken when I handed it off. This was broken. And now I've seen what needs to be done to make this process more efficient. You want to automate something, give it to somebody as it is and pay them to do it. And you'll recognize very quickly, oh shit, instead of 15 steps to get this done, this should be 7 steps. Go and get that done. And you get that much close to taking that task back, having it automated or systematized and going from there. But handing over a broken process and paying somebody to do it, we found is a very quick way to get closer to automating that task.
even when you guys yourselves are in fact you guys are self-capable automators, which I think is fantastic. I know not every business / startup individual is going to have that same capacity or availability. I still believe your principle reigns true that you are first and foremost the most you're probably the biggest expert in the room when it comes to your own workflows, especially the ones that you're trying to hand off to somebody else.
Yep.
Given that you're not requesting help with something that is not necessarily the definition of outsourcing, but rather the definition of, hiring an agency or having someone else do work for you, right? It's different when you're asking someone to build out a website for you because you have no idea what website development feels like or works like, versus you've got a workflow that you've been doing all this time and you have to, eventually take it away and give it to somebody else.
Yep.
If hopefully you then come back to it later and automate it. Even then, going to an automation engineer of any caliber, the no-code folks of the world, the low-code, the custom developers, God forbid you have to go that far to build something within your business. The frankness of it is they're going to ask you the same questions. Why is this inefficient? Why is this the way that it is? And you either pay them to work out those inefficiencies for you, which they come at the cost of a pretty penny, or, as I would argue anyone should do in business, you find the lowest cost denominator available solution to a problem, right?
Yeah.
And I think at this point, as far as I've seen across the global set of options that we have for most internet businesses, from work remote, human
Yeah.
API, as I like to call it.
The parallels between, VA work or anything else here and automating your tasks and working with teams to complete these workflows, it's so parallel to what PeakBot does for people's portfolios. It's like, hey, automate that. You're spending so much time trying to make a buck in the market and you're struggling to just scratch and claw, to get even into the green. Automate it. Find a low cost solution. PeakBot is $29 a month. It pays for itself. We're intentionally not getting rich on your subscription, whereas our competitors are. We're just like, look, let's get this in the hands of everybody. Let's be the household name for automated trading. And when you go and automate one of our strategies, this is going to sound a little, I don't know the word, but might rub people the wrong way. If you come to PeakBot and you have a less than ideal experience, strictly that's going to just be focused around results. Our user experience is simple enough to where you're not going to hate that. Nobody's got anything to say about that. But if you make a couple bad trades using our strategy, guess what? It's not the strategy's fault. It's just not. We have a winning. We know that our strategy wins. We've live tested, back tested over time. This exact strategy that we've automated has been around for decades. We know it's not the strategy. You picked the wrong stock at the wrong time. So what automating your process does with something like PeakBot and paying a low cost or an affordable cost to do so, and you still lose, now it's your time to reevaluate your whole approach to this. Because you're just picking the wrong stocks. Your workflow, your stock picking workflow. Conrad, me and you went through this a couple weeks ago. You're like, dude, tell me your process. How do you go about picking stocks? And I'm no Warren Buffett. I couldn't be further from it, but I made 32% last year with my hands in my pockets using PeakBot to trade for me while I'm building this business. Anybody who doesn't want that, as the layman I am, to make 32% last year, come on, if that's not example enough. But my point is, it's like we're gonna have losing traders who are upset and they come to us and they say, well, what the hell's going on? Well, look, you're probably not spending enough time on your process. We'd love to just say, give us your money and we'll triple it in the next 5 years. We'd love for it to be that easy. It's not. It's just not.
Right.
So
Getting into that financial advisory space requires a lot of other conditions that are just not conducive.
No, and that's the other thing. It's like that bleeds into another conversation, which we don't need to dive into, but what percentage of people in this country do you think? I don't have the answer, but what percentage of people in this country who aren't a student and are in the workforce can afford a financial advisor? Okay, by the way, like to set the bar here, the minimum, you want a real financial advisor. I'm not talking about your cousin Tony who lets you in.
Commission-driven brokerage account representative.
Morgan Stanley ain't looking at you unless you got $250,000 for them to take. 250. Okay, let's talk 100 grand, which now we're already stretching. Like any legitimate financial advisors from big firms they don't care about you. They wouldn't even sneeze in my direction. Like what are you going to do with my 15K that's sitting here? Nothing. You're not going to take it. And by the way, if there's any financial advisors who's taking your 15K and managing it, find a new financial advisor because they should have better things to do. But not that was maybe a hot take. But my point is like 90% of people can't even afford to or don't even have the capital necessary for a financial advisor to even be interested. So what options are left? Robinhood, Conrad, how'd you your first stock trade you ever made? Just out of curiosity, I don't care when it was. How'd you do it? Robinhood. It was my answer too. It's like, okay, cool. Robinhood. What Robinhood did? Say what you want about Robinhood. Okay, they've gotten themselves in hot water from time to time.
There's a lot to say lately. Yes.
Sure. Okay, but one thing that cannot be denied is they completely changed the game of retail trading because they made it easy. People don't realize how archaic this process was just 10 years ago. You wanted to place a trade before Robinhood. Honestly, 15 years ago, not even 10 years ago, you had to call your broker. You were making a phone call to place a trade. How ridiculous does that sound? It's like they flipped it. They made it available. Why is Robinhood so popular? Why are they a household name for retail trading? Because it's easy to use. More than anything else, it is so easy to use. It's free. So you remove that barrier. Go ahead. You want to say something?
It's just you've already sort of held out the canary that came out of the coal mine. The truth behind what made Robinhood so accessible and the reality behind how, I mean, now we're getting into this whole other side of the conversation, which again, this is part of the million topics that I think we could get into. I'm surprised we brought up financial advisors this time around. But I'm now going down the path of Wall Street Bets, GameStop, the way retail trading was impacted in that regard, and how Robinhood played its role in that relationship with Wall Street. I'm not an expert enough to speak on those topics. I do know enough to recognize how that conversation's been going and how interesting that is for, again, the average everyday retail investor. And again, what is their role and responsibility now more than any other time to do their best to build wealth, because it is increasingly getting more difficult. There's just so much to be said about that. And again, the role that you're trying to play within PeakBot, while also being, the biased salesman that you have to be, right? You have to speak to your vices as much as to your success with what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's so challenging. And I want to do the same to preach about you and be like, I've got skin in the game too now, both as a consumer and as a provider. So it's just such a fascinating dilemma. Like, how do we help without coming across sleazy?
Yeah, no, it's a tough. That's the challenge of it all, right? And when you mention Robinhood, the name Robinhood is ironic, painfully ironic, right? Like they want it to be the real modern day.
Oh,
Robinhood.
How else do you write history?
Right?
You got to brand yourself as the right guy,
and they
especially when you're the wrong guy.
Yeah, the Robinhood was taking from the rich and giving to the poor, right? Like that's kind of the idea behind it, and they ended up doing, the exact opposite. You can argue, but if you haven't, by the way, if you haven't seen the movie Dumb Money on Netflix about this whole ordeal, the GameStop, AMC, watch it. It's fascinating and it's funny and it's loaded with great actors. And it follows the story of what actually happened pretty accurately.
It falls in line with The Big Short.
Yeah, another great one. But PeakBot, really what we're trying to do is take your opinion on Robinhood as a business out of it and just think of them functionally as a business for the consumer. We're trying to take the Robinhood approach to automated trading. That's our goal, because they flipped the world on its head, and we're trying to do the same thing for the everyday person and putting a stock trader in their pockets. So I'm very passionate about it. I if you couldn't tell by my intro, it's like I'm not this guy. I'm not a stock trader that stares at his charts all day. I'm just a normal dude who's now a dad who has a passion for building a business and connecting other businesses and shit. If I can, use PeakBot successfully, then anybody can. My dad, who doesn't know his ass from his elbow in the market, made 30% last year. Made 30% using PeakBot. If he can do that, anybody can do that. And I'll be sure to provide your audience with like a link to a demo video or our website or whatever so they can check it out for themselves. And maybe we do a coupon code for your listeners.
That would be delightful.
Yeah. What do you want the code to be?
Well aware.
Well aware. It's a lot of characters.
Well,
but
well
how
is
about just
fine.
aware? How about aware?
Aware's fine too. Yeah.
All caps.
Okay.
Use code AWARE. I'll build it right now.
Okay.
Use code AWARE, all caps. And if you can't spell aware, I don't want you as a customer. All caps, code AWARE. Going to get you 50% off your first PeakBot subscription. You can start trading hands-free today. The salesman in me just can't stay out of this conversation, Conrad.
Okay.
But no,
It's
seriously,
okay, Dillon.
the code.
I will let people take time to get to know more about you as we continue this conversation in future editions. Again, I want to follow this particular story in particular. I want to follow this particular story. Particularly. Thank you. The dynamic for me is it's just one of joy and of sorrow. I want to try to do my justice to explain to the audience how my individual experience with using this application has made me if there's one additional story I'll attach to this during the blog side of this content when it gets rolled out. I'll include the copy that I created to reflect or copy is the right word. I wrote a post at one point, if I recall, that kind of showcased about 2 years ago where my experiences were with using PeakBot and where I was emotionally amongst everything else. I would say a lot of that post that I wrote still hasn't changed in terms of my overall feelings around using this application. My sense of business and focus and maturity have changed, and I'm a lot less emotional in general about a lot of things. But still, I think this conversation about where we're at in this particular generation, what type of wealth we need to generate in order to be successful in life, how we're going to go about doing that. Dillon, I invite you to please allow me to continue this conversation at a later date so that we can kind of keep going around this because there's a lot we could continue to uncover. With that being said, thank you for our time.
Thank you. And thank you to your audience. Thank you to your business, Well Aware. Thank you for being a customer. Thank you for being a great networker and connector. Thank you, Conrad. And I just want to leave maybe one last thing to anybody who's watching this. Let me preach for a second. To anybody who's watching this, whatever it is you're doing, to generate money for yourself, whether it is the corporate America or an entrepreneur or a combination of the two, find what you really love to work on. I know it's so cliche and it's like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like, I wish that wasn't as true as it is. It is so true. I'm so lucky and blessed to being able to work on this business. Not to say that it doesn't drive me up the wall more than 90% of the time, but I would just challenge everybody, specifically entrepreneurs who are out there trying to build a business, and maybe Conrad, you can relate to this. Go all in. There's no half-assing it. There's no giving it, a certain date or timeline in the future where if it's not figured out by then, I'm not doing. Just be relentless about what you're doing and in your building. What I've found is that when you're ready to fold and everything is doomsday and the walls are closing in, that's when shit happens. If you're doing things for the right reason and you're building a business the right way in your gut, when the cards are when you're almost out, that's when good shit happens. And it's really fun to keep filling up that tank when you get those little wins, especially when you really needed it. So just be relentless in your pursuit of, entrepreneurial ship, or if that's even a full word, I don't know. But I just wanted to put that out there. I've had so many instances just in the last few months where, you think something's just about done or you're ready to crack, and good shit starts to happen. So just be relentless in your pursuit of success and happiness, and it'll be just all right. And maybe you'll get invited on a podcast like this one day.
Thank you, Dillon. Thank you for being here. As always, be well and aware.
Ciao for now.